Okay, right. So we are officially starting. Welcome, welcome to our second in the series of the PMX Academy, free webinars on subjects that we hope are going to be of interest to musicians and others working around music from Palestine, Palestinians and the diaspora, and anybody else who's interested in this topic. I'd like to introduce myself. Some of you may know me, but my name is Sarah Williams. I'm one of the PMX management team. I'm a UK music lawyer, independent music lawyer. I've kind of worked for myself for many, many years. And I'm also run an organization that is a licensing organization for independent music publishers, and we collectively license the works of our members to digital platforms like Google and Spotify and Amazon and all of that. And one of the greatest things that I've done in my professional career is get involved in PMX, which has been an amazing journey. I've met some incredible people, heard some wonderful music, and made some great friendships and relationships. And that's how the subject for this webinar came about. So those that have played at PMX, been to PMX, hopefully will have had the opportunity to, meet delegates, meet the management team, and forge relationships that start at the Expo, but that go on and develop beyond the Expo. And this webinar came about really because of the relationship that I developed with Moody, who is here, Moody Kablawi, amazing artist, and Maram, his sister and manager. So I got to know Maram and Moody together, but also Maram on the management side of things, because you did an internship with PMX. And so, like the relationship I have with quite a lot of other PMX artists, we keep in touch regularly, and, we ask each other questions, we share information, and we support each other in all sorts of different ways, and we support the PMX project. So I can't remember how long ago, but a few months back, Maram, you kind of asked me just to get involved a little bit in, you were putting together press and marketing materials for Moody, and asked for some input from me, and I thought it was great. But could be greater if what was really infused into this material is a real authentic and powerful sense of Moody. Not just Moody, his tracks, not just Moody, the cool looking guy, but Moody, the person, Moody, who you are, what your journey has been, what you've got to say, and what's the unique and special contribution that you're making through your music, the essence of who you are. And I felt, God, I think this needs to come through more powerfully. And then I remembered Ant Phillips, who is going to be leading this today. And Ant and I, we go back a long way, but Ant's background is in brand storytelling. So his whole expertise and kind of modus operandi and thinking about things is to understand in his professional life sort of brands as a story, to understand what we're trying to communicate through the things that we do, the things that we say, the visual things we put out there. And I thought, yeah, I think that it will be really, really helpful to put Moody and Maram together to have a conversation and see, if there's a way to kind of tease out those key elements and see whether we could kind of come up with something. So I was sort of thinking about it really in the first instance, more like kind of, marketing stuff, bios and biographies and things like that. But actually, what transpired in the many conversations that we had was something much deeper and more profound. And we're going to hear about this now. And I'm really, really grateful to Maram and Moody for being up for sharing this sort of journey that they went on and we went on in this really kind of open way, to really help tease out this whole topic of what, as an artist, are you trying to do? What are you trying to communicate? What do you want to say? You know, what do you stand for? You know, how do you connect to your real and authentic audience, the audience that's really interested in you, really interested in your expression of your ideas, so and your creativity. So that's how it all kind of came together. Now, I should say also that Maram's really kindly my co-host on this. We've got a presentation that, well, Ant's got a presentation. I actually can't claim that for myself. That Maram has very kindly translated into Arabic. But she's also here to interpret if necessary. And if anybody here who's a participant would like to ask a question and feels more comfortable to ask that question in the chat in Arabic, please go ahead. Or if you're asking a question out loud, please go ahead in Arabic and Maram will translate. Or if there's something in the presentation that isn't kind of making sense to you, then please, you can also put in the chat a question and we'll try and address that as we go along. Generally speaking, we'll kind of find special moments to answer questions, but please don't feel inhibited if you want to kind of ask something that you think is really important along the way. So that's the background. And now I would like to introduce you to Ant Phillips. Ant, hello.
Hello, how are you?
Thanks so much for being with us today. It's absolutely fantastic to have you here. And it's fantastic that you just hopped onto this project with such enthusiasm and such commitment. It's been absolutely brilliant. First and foremost, I think it would be great for people to know a little bit about your background, you know, and kind of set up for everybody, you know, what your experience is and you know, and why this is of particular interest to you.
Okay, well, I'll do a quick biography. Hi, everybody. I got into the storytelling, but largely via my marketing, and it seemed a great way. I'll go into that later. But in the background, also Sarah wanted to share that I do, you know, to some extent understand performance. I was and still am occasionally a poet. I started off, and again, this was an interest in my, can everyone see that? Where are we?
I think it's just taking a little while to load up.
Okay.
It should be.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is that it?
There you go. Now it's on. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Quickly. This is my background. I was a poet called Ant the Rant on the London circuit going around. And I did, you know, a lot of my stuff was storytelling. That was my first volume of poetry there. That is a story that turned into a poem and turned into a backing track as well, the Colostomy Del Mar, which is a story really about what happens to the raving generation when they get older. And that was my way of communicating, really, was to do comic stories. And this was a comic version of a retirement home in Ibiza in 2035, which was written in the year 2000. And obviously we're not too far away from that coming to fruition. I started the poetry, and this again was part of the background. I was lucky enough to be in London during a very exciting time. This was a bar that I used to frequent all the time, where I met all sorts of people, and this was where art and music mixed. And Pete Doherty of the Libertines used to come down on Sundays and do poetry. The bar was owned by Bill Drummond of KLF, who wanted everyone. I even saw and met Banksy there one time. So it was a mix of all sorts of people, and I think that spurred on my interest in storytelling, if you like, to perform there and do my poetry there. So then I got into marketing round about the same time, and that's where my interest expanded, really. I saw that storytelling to me, suddenly became branding. That was the most powerful way. And we were constantly with clients who wanted to explain themselves. They wanted to go, what's my brand? You know, what's it about? And we discovered that stories were by far the easiest way to do this. Do you want me to go into the main presentation? Sorry, Sarah.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah.
Why not?
Okay. Let me just go into that.
Although maybe we could also, just before you start, kind of clarify, you know, we're talking about brands, and branding is something that's kind of seen as very commercial, you know, for selling products and
yeah.
But I think, you know, in the context we're talking about here, it's something different, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is with what we discovered when we started to work with stories is, and I went in through the back door through branding, but actually what you realize is that storytelling itself can be attached to anything. And I know here as musicians, people are always asked to develop their own brand. What is your story? And that everyone has thousands of stories to their lives, but it's pulling out the elements. What is your big story? And as we'll go on to this to discover, there are certain elements of that story that can be put together that help people to understand, because stories are about meaning. They're about what does your artistry, your music mean? What does your story mean? How does that enable you to emotionally connect with people and to build a following? You know, ultimately, you want people to understand what you're about and the people that you want to connect with, and that's where stories can help.
If I could add to this as my perspective of being a producer or just a producer in my own musical bubble, let's say. For me, doing the whole progress with you, Ant, was very, very giving the right dots I should focus on in my long story, and gave me enough tools to really be comfortably comfortable. Okay, sometimes some words drops. Like to really approach my social media in a comfort way and to have enough tools to really bring my elements more obvious, because for me it's obvious what is my story, but it doesn't mean how I type the text under the post would be how I get my story. So that's why I felt this webinar is super important for us as musicians, and so I think whenever we go deeper now, which you'll do now, deeper in details, people will get it more.
Yeah, sure.
It was important to add this for me.
Yeah. And I think that's the point. You know, I'm not here to tell people how to write their stories. What I'm here to do is just to show elements to help you analyze. And whether you're writing the storytelling elements can be used to write songs, they can be used to project yourself on social media, they're used for advertising, they're used for entertainment. And so really there's very similar elements that can be used for a myriad of reasons. So that's what we focus on. Okay. Just an interesting point, that this was our company logo, and a lot of people ask me, why did I put clouds there? And one of the reasons was I suddenly realized, and a lot of people hadn't noticed this, that every big film company seemed to use clouds, and there was something about symbolic about that was the symbol of beginning. It was an idea, and it's usually storm clouds at sunset as well. So that's a little background. This was the biggest story we worked on 10 years ago, and this was what got me really interested in how stories can be used. And the open happiness story, which eventually happened with Coca Cola, started off with Minute Maid for us, and it was attaching. They wanted to inject some kind of meaning into the Minute Maid brand, and we looked at sunshine and orange juice and how that was related to happiness, and then how you could attach different elements and inject some kind of more meaning to the brand. And so we came up with these small stories that were sent around to agencies all over the world, and this was facets of happiness. What makes people happy? How do you get happy? We looked at the power of giving things to people, thinking of yourself, the power of you, analysing yourself, how you react to situations is a function of happiness. What kind of attitude you have, is it half empty or half full? And this started to unfold a whole brand meaning, which the main brand of Coca Cola eventually took in to create the whole ethos of open happiness. And they did the facets of happiness on the website, and a lot of these attitudes were taken into the brand and manifested in campaigns, social media, and so on. So we saw that was a long time ago, even before some of the social media became as big as it is today. So what I'll just take you quickly through is, you know, what is a story and why is it important? And that this is showing how powerful they are in our minds, the science of it as well, how stories affect us. There's now a lot more scientific studies been done to show how the brain is affected. Then I'm going to go into the Hollywood story structure, which we analysed and used in our workshops, the actual elements, and then how do you apply those to your own stories to create something that can connect with more people. And then we'll talk about Moody and Maram, the case study that we worked on together. So you'll find lots of definitions of stories. You know, it's an account of imagining of real people for entertainment. It's a plot, a story. I would wipe all of these out of the way because this isn't a story. People say a story is a narrative. It's not a narrative. A narrative is the way children tell stories. There are certain elements that make what a story is, and that is the important thing. To start to show how that affects us, our brains are actually wired to evolve through stories. This picture here, this monkey carrying the puppy, I use this in a lot of workshops to explain to people how your brain is wired to ask, what is the story? What is the meaning of this? Now, this went viral on social media many years ago. In some instances, people said it was the monkey was rescuing a dog from a firework, and there was a factory explosion in Nanjing. And this appeared as the monkey was rescuing, and I can see in the background, you could see, almost interpret that as flames. After the Japanese tsunami, people were saying that this dog was rescuing, the monkey was rescuing the dog from the tsunami. And in another instance, people were saying, no, the monkey was being trained to steal puppies for dog meat in China. Now, you see there, it's interesting. People want to attach meaning to these things. They feel compelled to write their own story behind what they see from one photograph. And actually, the real meaning behind this, there isn't a meaning, because this was taken by a wedding photographer in America, and he simply shot this monkey playing around with a puppy. That was it. There was no meaning behind it at all. But our brains want to create a meaning. We see this unusual thing. There's another experiment here that shows this, and this was an animation done in a laboratory in 1944. They brought people in and they asked them, they just said, what is going on here? Only one person out of hundreds of people that they questioned said, it's just some triangles and a circle moving around. Everyone else tried to attach meaning. Some people even said, you know, the two men are having a fight over a girl, the girl's getting worried. You know, they're injecting emotion into these abstract shapes. And that is, our minds want to tell stories. Our minds want to create a meaning from anything, whether it be a few triangles or dots. We are creating stories in our heads all the time. And that's, I think, you know, that's stories are what separate us from animals. They allow us to talk about things that don't really exist. I mean, there we're looking at injecting meaning into triangles and circles. But the important thing is stories we use for learning. They help us to learn. We can talk about things like, for example, this is the story, an old fairy tale of Red Riding Hood in the forest with a wolf. Now, when we actually start hearing that story, our brains almost act like we are there here in the woods with an animal, and that is what helps us to learn. So, and the other thing about them is that the similar sense of story can be shared across different cultures. The same story can have meaning in different cultures. This is a great example as well, is what is a story? These are the facts. The king died, then the queen died. That's how someone would tell it. That's just a straightforward, factual narrative. How do you turn it into a story? The king died, then the queen died of a broken heart. Now suddenly we've got a story. We've got an emotional context. We've got emotional meaning in why did this happen? And that's the biggest question you have to ask in storytelling, is why? Why did something happen? So the facts will tell you what happened. The story tells you why it's happened. And that is why the stories are so powerful, because they're giving us meaning. They're telling us why, the why of life. And they also, they you know, in our concepts, they give meaning to brands. They can give meaning to people as well. Apple's great campaign of Think Different, this suddenly applied a meaning, and here they used musicians here. That was a powerful, powerful campaign that just said, you know, we're not about telling you what a computer is, you know, that it's a set of, you know, we do better processing, we do better this. No, they said, these are the people that use Apple computers. And the people that use Apple computers are doing this to be different. And they're creative people. That's why. So what happens? What happens to our brains, you know, when we listen to a story? More of the brain will light up. If I told you a list of facts, but then tell you a story, our cortex evolve as if we're actually going through an experience. You know, when we're watching a film, you're watching an adventure film, you know, in the laboratory, they found people's palms start to sweat, the adrenaline gets pumping, their heart beats faster. You know, you are experiencing the story. They can trigger physical reactions. It creates empathy. We can understand those characters. We go through it. We put ourselves in that position. And because of that, we can remember things. It enhances our memory. And it persuades people to do things. It can change behavior. In charity ads, there's an example of a charity, a cancer charity, that used this. They actually took blood samples and they found that people do release cortisol, which is a stress hormone, and oxytocin, which is the love hormone, which is an empathy hormone. And they could tell by taking the blood sample when this advert, the advert that helped people react, they took the blood sample, they could even predict to an 80% accuracy whether those people would actually commit some money to the charity. That's how powerful it is. So they're the most powerful form of marketing. They help you make emotional connections to people they appeal to. And for you guys as artists as well, it's, you know, it's your brand, your story. You can figure out who to connect to, who to appeal to. You can influence people. You can help to persuade and mobilize for your particular cause in music. And stories, as we've seen recently, this is very topical at the moment. You know, that one story that came out of George Floyd suddenly creates this huge movement around the world. That's how powerful they are. Now, these are the actual basic elements, and I'm sorry we didn't translate this screen, but we've translated the following slides so we can see the meaning. But this is what we use in a lot of our workshops with people. So, inciting incident. This was coined by a guy called Robert McKee, who's a Hollywood script editor. This is the thing that starts the story off, beyond which life is never the same again. Something happens and everything changes. And it's how those characters respond. So from Star Wars, from the droid to Cinderella, everything has a starting point and a moment. Where do you want your story to start? Context is, you look at the world around you. Which world is it taking place in? Some entertaining stories take place in the past. Some take place in the future. Your own story can take place in what is the world that you are operating in, and which bit of that world do you want to talk about and influence? Every story and every character has motives and goals. For example, you know, Breaking Bad, if any of you have seen this, or even Cinderella, Cinderella wants to go to the ball. In Breaking Bad, he's told he's got cancer and he needs to support his family, so he needs to make money. And if that's an illegal way of making money, it doesn't matter, but everyone has a motive. Obviously, there are characters, but within stories, there are sets of characters. There are people that are with you, and there are always people that are against you, and that's part of a story, is its struggle. You know, no one talks about life is easy. It's who are you struggling against and who's helping you on the way. And struggle and conflict. I mean, they didn't make until recently a film about the moon landings that showed, oh, we went to the moon and we landed and that was great. Nothing went wrong. They made the movie first about Apollo 13, where everything goes wrong. That's the story. That's what people are interested in. They're interested in people overcoming barriers to reach their goals. And stories, really, they explore dynamic opposites. Every story, the best stories, are all about the difference between love and hate. Is it courage and cowardice? War and Peace, the title of the book, is itself a dynamic opposite. It's the shift from justice to injustice, good, bad, happiness, sadness. So that's a way of thinking in the background all the time. Your own story, it shifts between these things. Where are you moving? And this is actually a Hollywood analysis of a Pulp Fiction film, which shows the movement of that story and the acts and the dynamic way it moves from positive to negative. You can apply this. It's quite an interesting exercise when you're watching films and look at the way that the action goes from good to bad to better to worse to so on throughout a film. So how do you apply all of this to your own story? That's the important bit we want to talk about. So these are the things just to think about. Is like, where do you want your story to start? What is the core beginning of all of this? Where does it start? And there are lots of starting points for dependence on how you want to, who you're appealing to, how you want to set the story. The character is certainly who you want to appeal to. What are they going to identify with? Who are you interacting with? Who's against you and who's for you? That's a very important question to ask, is who is supporting you? Who are you against? Because by supporting a type of motive, your big why, the motive at the bottom here, what are you doing this for? What's driving you? What are your goals? What kind of a world's the story taking place in? And again, that can be from the motives as well. It's the kind of world you're in, and you'll see with Moody, we looked at this world that's developing and how we set his story against it. And struggle, the big question, who's trying to stop you getting to your aims, your goals in life? What's stopping you? Who are you fighting for shows who you're actually fighting against. And an interesting exercise we do with people is this: if suddenly you were on the cover of Time magazine, what would your little headline be? How would you? We do this with lots of clients. We've got examples of this where we've even done it with shampoo companies. We've done it with lots of people. We put them on the cover and go, if they gave you a story, how would you sum up what your big campaign would be? What do you want to tell people? And it's quite interesting. You could even use a music magazine or a website. imagine yourself up there and say, what is it you want to talk about? What's your big issue that you want to put over? So what we'd say is straight off is, you know, as I say, I'm not here to tell you how to write. I'm here to say these are the elements that people are interested in. So it's your own story. You know, be as authentic as possible. Don't be afraid of negatives. People want to hear how you overcame a struggle. That makes a story. That's the most important part of a story, how you react to struggle. Think in opposites. You know, what you are for and believe in is also what you're against. Don't think about you. Think about who you're connecting to and appealing to. And remember, you know, when we talk about the context and the struggles, they can be internal as well. You can be fighting against your own inner demons. You can be fighting against imaginary things as well as external physical things. So, and the most important question is why? And really, you can ask yourself that as well. You know, why? Why are you into music? You know, why do you want to be a performer? Why do you play the instrument or the kind of music you do? Why do you actually want to attract a following? You know, why do you want to influence people and talk to people? Why do you want to go on a stage and do it? And those are interesting questions beyond anything, you know, on the surface. Like, I want to be famous, I want to make money. But there's also there's still a bigger reason. There's a bigger why behind all of those ambitions. And that's our little story workshop. So we can have a discussion. Sarah, do you want to?
Well, I think maybe, yeah, if we just come off screen sharing just for a moment.
Okay.
Great. Okay, fantastic. So I think this would be a really great moment to bring in Moody and Maram and just talk a little bit about how we started this conversation and what your feelings were and what you thought you were going to get out of this, Maram and Moody, and you know, how it was different to your expectations maybe, and then we can go on and see what was the outcome. So have we?
Okay, so for me, I would first of all, thank you so much, Ant, for bringing all this information together, and thanks to PMX and arranging this. It's beautiful. I'm very excited to share it to the world. For me, like it all happened before the crowdfunding that I was having a few months ago. Before that, like we had a new EP, blurry EP to represent, and whenever we sent you, Sarah, the press kit, I felt like, and you responded back, because you know my story and you know me personally, you know all the elements that are somehow in your eyes were missing there. Then it just opened up for me, like what I'm not bringing right. That's exactly what I also said in the beginning of this webinar, or like before we started. That's like, I know my story, but I didn't have enough tools to really look at it outside and to see, to look at it as a, let's say, that every post I would put on my social media, it's under one umbrella, which is my story. I've never looked at it like this, in this sense, you know? And then like it gave me the tools actually after doing all the stuff we did, because like for you guys basically to know, me and Maram, we just typed, we digged actually. We typed all the elements that we remember from my history career or my personal career. Also, Maram is my sister before being my manager, so she knows also my progress as an artist as a child. So we gave him tons of information, and he just brought back this beautiful presentation, bringing the right dots and the switches of the career that actually shows in one presentation how a big, huge progress of a musician. And this is just inspired me to really look at my posts and releases plans as content, and what do I approach to the audience. It just gave me the tools to plan it proper and to build a better build up, to really see better goal I want to reach in my posting, and not just sharing my music, but also bringing, I don't know, like for example, actually, I started trying that since the last post I did in social media about the last release I did with my friend Vinay Lunar. And I shared from where it came from, this verse that I wrote, and I shared it from the point that how it reflects the eye condition that I have. And then I really saw an amazing comments, like responding and way faster than any post that I posted before. So for me, like that was something, okay, so it's nice to look at it from this point of view, basically. Yeah, that's what I feel that this did to me, and I'm sure the more I dive deep into it, I'll find more tools myself within my story. But yeah, that was a complete navigation. In a few words, complete navigation.
If I may add also, yeah, again, thank you and Sarah for putting all of this together. That actually these elements that you talked about, and they really inspire the artist, because, or any person who wants to write his or her story, because we are in our story, so we kind of like take it for granted. So when you have these elements, you can just zoom out and you see, oh wow, I have so many, you know, stuff to talk about, or interesting issues to share, that might be my next song or my next post or whatever. So yeah, it's the main thing is inspiration. That's what I felt from yeah.
Shall we have a look at what you created together now? And that'll give people a better idea, I think, of what we're talking about. And then we can open it up to other people to ask questions.
Yeah, sure. Do I do it do you want me to do it from mine?
Yeah, if you could.
Okay, so I need to... Right, okay. Okay, so I just need to hit, okay.
And obviously, Maram and Moody, please, you know, comment on this as we go along too. If there's anything that kind of really, you know, made you think, or, you know, that would be helpful to explain to people, that would be great.
Sure.
Okay, so this is eventually, after boiling it down, and I know Moody had lots of stories. It was a very powerful story, but what we looked to do is to boil it down into something that people could understand and give it almost a bigger motive and meaning, really. And it all came down to, you know, the world of, this is the context, is it's a world that's trying to divide people. And people want to divide into black and white, into men and women, north, south, north versus south. They set people up against each other. East versus west, Muslim versus Christian, Muslim versus Jew, Muslim versus Muslim, Christian versus Christian. And people want to try and create lines to separate us all. There's a perfect physical example. Even in music, you know, that people like order. They want to order everything into boxes and to say, this is this kind of music, this is another. And this was something I felt that through Moody, this wasn't about his music. Why does every label have to have its own label? They even try and signify and classify something as simple as hip hop into all these different types to try and explain things. And we all know, you know, life is even more complicated than this. It's much more complicated. There's a bit in between. It's not just about yes and no. There's a discussion and a debate. We say black and white, but there's a billion shades of grey in between everything. And this is where we saw with Moody, he was born to see things differently. He's a Palestinian who grew up in Palestine 48. He was a lighting engineer who had visual impairment because he's got hereditary nystagmus, which means the world is naturally blurry. And we saw that as a gift almost.
We can pause here, so if people doesn't know what nystagmus is.
Yeah. Well, sorry, yeah.
Because like basically, okay, maybe I was born seeing stuff differently, but other people would think, okay, what the fuck, you know? Like, no, it's literally, physically, I don't see well. Basically, I have this nerve condition, which is genetic. I was born with, which affects my visuals. I'm not gonna go deep into explaining the condition now, but basically, this is what we're talking about like a level of blurriness to not be able to drive a car, for example, or not to be allowed to have a license. Yeah. So that it's called horizontal nystagmus. Also, that's why my eyes are dancing. I don't know if you noticed that.
Or not seeing a person in the other any way, or you know, like far away people that far away you just hear them.
Yeah, so that's my default basically. I don't know a different default than this. So I was born into this. That's what we're trying to.
Yeah. Sorry, I should have done some explanation maybe before, but.
Alles klar. This is an inner presentation.
Yeah.
Anyway.
So so in a sense, what we looked at is that you know the terrible vision is actually a positive, because you don't see the lines, and it's why he toured the world with musicians who refused to serve in the army. Why he hasn't got a specific style? He looks at everything. He goes from rap to hip hop, and it's why, and that's the thing we noted. You know, that's why his first album is called Blurry, because it's blurring the edges, and we see that as a main motive, and part of tying the elements of this story together is blurring the edges of things and making people think that we're not dividing into boxes. There's a world that goes on in between, and let's celebrate that diversity, really. To blur the edges of all sorts of things, which becomes quite a powerful way. And then we looked at ways of losing different hashtags, but the idea of blurring the lines, blurring the edges, blurring people's thinking, making people look beyond the barriers that are there. And so, looking at the presentation we just gave and breaking it down, so this is where we look at the insights and incidents that make Moody what he is. The character that he exposes is the wisdom of seeing the world from a different way, a different vision, really, and rebelling against what is the norm. The context is this world that is trying to divide everybody and separate people. And the motive is to help everyone see beyond that. That's what he's doing through different styles of music, through the way he presents himself, celebrate the differences, look at the life isn't black and white, it's not grey even, there's lots more in between. And the struggle is battling against that prejudice and that preconceptions, the labels that everyone's given, and creating as well the creativity without any specific boundaries. I'm making this kind of music or this kind of music. It's having more freedom than that, really. So that's where we put it into action.
Brilliant. Do you want to come off the screen share now?
Yeah, I'm coming off now. Okay.
Great. Thanks. Moody and Maram, do you want to comment any more on that and maybe talk about that kind of journey that you went on in this discussion, or whether there were any, what we would call light bulb moments? That kind of.
I can say from my side, knowing Moody, as his sister, from the minute that he was born, and then becoming his manager also, that writing the story of Moody from my side, I actually discovered things that I thought, I don't know, I didn't pay attention to, or as I said before, they were taken for granted. And then it just light up my eyes for who Moody is, actually, and what we can use from his story that he went through in his life, in our life as a family also, to use it for his career, his music, and also to connect more people in a personal, you know, more personal aspect of Moody, actually, not only the musician.
Do you think, Maram, as a manager, that it's sometimes too easy to be stuck in the process of making music and putting music out and promoting music, that you're thinking a lot about how does it look, how does it sound, when are we going to release it, do we have the budget, what's the marketing, you know, that actually you need to go back to the very basics and think, who am I, why am I doing this, and what am I trying to say, and how does my life experience affect all of that? You know, why do I want to communicate through music, and who do I want to communicate to?
Exactly. And actually, yeah, we can get stuck in this because you want to promote and you want the next campaign to succeed, and especially now with all of the world situation. And if you actually connect to the basics, as I learned through the ants process, it makes things easier, actually, because people really relate to this more intuition. By intuition, I mean they don't see you as a product, or okay, maybe no, he's way too like selling himself way too much, or posting too much, or this and that. But if you share your story, it's never too much, because it's your story, and people really relate to this personally, and then it's really easier to get to people and to get to agents even, because they want to hear personal stories, not okay, one more rapper or one more hip-hop artist, or I mean there's so many, plenty. What makes you stand out of all of these artists? So this is very important.
Yeah, now I would like actually to add to this, somehow like to see now this presentation and to show it to someone also. This is again like what also Ant tried to say in the beginning. Like this is not a way to, Ant is not trying to tell your story, but it's about giving the tools or the clear image from far away to know how to really bring the deep important details inside in a good strategy, and on which points to really, even just using simple headliners, you know, and then actually talking what you want to talk. And I feel this is important thing for nowadays, because nowadays we are super fast, you know, you just open your Instagram and you scroll down, you want something to catch your eyes if it was visually or something. But like eventually also all of this progress for me just gave me another perspective to focus on. Even it's about like the designs, the artwork designs, that I should even put the elements over there. Yeah, maybe I tried to start it from blurry EP, but I didn't know how to continue. So I feel this presentation and this progress with the ant progress, as Maram called it, gave me the tools to really continue my creativity progress in this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Can I just chip in now and just say that if anybody would like to ask a question, can they raise their hand on the chat? I think it should be clear how to do this.
Not physically, people.
And then we can bring you in. But
You
while
can do it in Arabic also. So.
Yeah, and while you're thinking of any questions, and did you want to say something else?
No, I think I've done enough talking. I don't want to be dictatorial. No, I'm just glad that to help out with something like this, and I think it's nice. It's like Moody was saying, we don't want to tell you how to create. You know, we can't tell your story, but we can give you the framework that says these are the, pull out the interesting bits, look at it again, and analyze it. You know, there's more than one way to tell something, and I think.
Great. We've got a question here from Fadi Haddadine. Hi, Fadi. I've just unmuted you. Please go ahead.
Hey, Sarah. Thank you so much for that. And thanks, Ant, for your presentation. That was very insightful. Especially putting into the context of Moody as a case study, and salam to both of you. So my question is, again, talking about the story. So there's the artist story, and then there's the product story, which is in this case a single or an EP or an album.
Yeah, yeah.
How would you weave the two together, if at all? That's one question. And my second question would be, stories really came into, people started looking at stories from a marketing point of view when the shift happened from, talking about the technical functional specs to more of the positioning of a product within a market.
Yeah,
so positioning working in the music industry, especially maybe when you're talking about, obviously competition here is not probably the right word. If you're thinking about Apple and the Think Different, they're trying to position themselves differently from, like, say, the Microsofts of the world.
Yeah.
What's the analog of that for musicians?
Well, for music, I think with Apple, what they were doing is actually saying, they weren't selling the logical aspects of the computer, were they? They weren't even talking about the computer. They were trying to identify their product with the way people thought and with creative people. So in that way, that's how they positioned it to people, emotionally rather than factually. That's the difference. And I guess with a product, I mean, the actual single or an individual product can be just an extension of your whole thoughts, really, can't it? It's part of your brand, or for want of a better word, of your own story. It should just be a chapter in your story in some way. I wish I could think of an example, but I can't, to be honest.
How about one we were talking about before, Eminem?
Oh, Eminem, yeah. Well, with Eminem, I mean, that's the thing there was interesting how he differentiated himself. I mean, in a world where he set himself up almost to self-deprecation, it was interesting, and it was a world that at that time was, dominated by black artists, and sets himself up as a white guy to do that stuff is almost inviting criticism itself. And he managed to overcome that by actually, instead of, like a lot of rap was doing, was dissing other people, he dissed himself, and that's the legend that came out in 8 Mile, really. But that is part of his true story and background.
Do you think, and on that, and sorry, Fadi, you might have another point that you'd like to make, or another question or a follow-up, but is there a difference then between telling a story and telling your story?
No, because it's that, well, there's lots of aspects and extensions to your story, aren't there? It's like an episode in an overall theme, if you like. People get some expectation of what you're going to produce next. But with Moody, his story is all about blurring the edges, creating things where he can, I mean, to be honest, it's a freedom of expression that he can move into all sorts of areas from that. And that's still consistent with his own story. It's not a surprise if he moves in. I mean, in some ways that's a great advantage to an artist. Some artists will narrow their perspective, I think, to appeal to a certain group of people, and that's fine, It's a lot harder for them to move direction, but I mean, it's a matter of degree, isn't it? You can either increase the degree and specialization, or you can branch out and something, if your story is like this, is exploratory, is bigger. And that's why I think you make your story as big as possible. You make the motive in your story as big as possible. How you change the world, what are you going to put into the world? The bigger that ambition and that part of your story is, the more expression you've got, and the more options you have of different products, if you like, or different tracks, or it's all part of that thing. It all relates to each other.
Can I add something for Fadi, for the project story and artist story? I think, for example, for Moody, because he has the nystagmus, so it's his story, but he has the Blurry album, so it's not a chapter of his story, because actually nystagmus, it is the main story.
Yeah.
But it's an aspect of the story. For example, the emotional side of nystagmus, that Moody came up with. So it doesn't have to be a chapter, right? Am I wrong? And please correct me.
No. I mean, no, I was just asking a question back to Fadi, because sorry, I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but you also talked about positioning. How do you position yourselves? And I think as part of your actual story should be is who you emotionally connect with. That's what stories are all about, really. And your antagonist and your protagonist, really, the people you want to reach. That is how you are positioning your track or whatever. It's who do you want to appeal to, really. I must admit, I've never done a music product. So how do you release it into the world itself? I mean, all you can do is tell the story of that track or whatever to the best advantage, to enable you to help people understand what the meaning is, what your positioning is. Make that clear. I mean, that can be clear. And also the types of media put it in obviously have a role to play in that. Positioning in markets, in marketing, is generally because you're against lots of other. It's not positioning in a physical sense. Obviously, it's positioning it within the mind. That's where products go.
This is important point.
Your product's got lots of different. There's lots of computers out on the market, and when you're thinking of it, and your brain has got little boxes of different brands and what they mean and where they go, where does it sit? And that's where Apple created they created a huge box, which was, forget what the computer does. We're going to position it in terms of, if you're creative, use us. And no one questions whether, so long as the computer can back that up, in its abilities, as it were, doesn't matter. You're positioning it mentally. So in the same way you position a track in someone's mind as well, whereabouts does that sit in their mind? Will it relax them? Will it excite them? Is it a track that signifies some kind of rebellion, so it appeals to their inner rebel? And that's a whole other set of story tools, which is the archetypes that we're all familiar with, that lots of scripts are written around sets of characters that we can all identify with, and we all know, love and hate, really, as well. So that's a whole other way of positioning stuff, is the characterization, touching on archetypes that are within us, really.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else want to ask a question? Not seeing any hands up at the moment. But Moody, Maram, and any closing thoughts?
No, I'm presumably we can make I don't mind making the decks. People can have those to have a look at as well. And really, if you've got any questions as well, you can kind of get in contact.
Yes,
by you, I guess. I'm quite happy to answer stuff. It's a hobby and a passion of mine as well. I think my own story is all about being curious. I think that's what drives me, and that's the explorer archetype, if you like, is that I love finding new things out in the world. I love explaining it, finding things and helping to explain it to people. And when I hit on something like the story elements that I find exciting, I want to bring other people into that and show them how it all works. It creates interesting discussions for people as well.
Yeah, and I would like to also add another perspective, that actually anything like for the musicians of us, anything that we do in our releases, when it comes to actually publishing something, it's possible to make a story from. And by saying that, it doesn't mean that you have to, create something or fake something, because we have all the details and information there. It's just about on which detail to look, and to use those tools to bring the story bright and clear for the viewer. yeah, even with like as relating to the question of Fadi, like for releases, for example, when it comes to positioning physically, you actually, how we do it is like we send actually press kit for the release itself to a promoting company, and this press kit itself is the storytelling part of this release. Basically, it's how you bring it to the promotion company. But there's way more aspects for that. Like for me, like sometimes like there's doing this progress also can give you way other elements than just using tools, how to present it. For example, for me, it was just really to open my eyes to another visual approach that in my next releases, you people will see it probably. It's under progress. But definitely, like, it just brought me more inspiration to really where to go as to build my signature or my visual appearance better or close to my concept and support it all together. So yeah, it's very, I don't know, like, and also if I want to really talk about the outside point of this progress, why it's healthy for me that we did it, it's just to have a refresh of who you are as a progressing, because I know all of us as independent artists, we just go through a crazy road and years of careers, and sometimes we look for another new sources for inspiration, but we forget that we already did a lot, and this is already something to use, you know. So this is very important. It was very important to remember after the progress, after the ant progress.
Yeah, you are your own inspiration, actually.
Yeah, also, man, bless you for
Okay, great, guys. I think we'll bring it to a close. Thanks everyone who joined us. A huge thank you to Ant and Moody and Maram for sharing you know, the kind of journey of inquiry that they went on together. I would just finish by saying this, that, you know, as I've gone on in life, one thing that I've really come to understand is the more authentically you are yourself, the more you project who you really are, what you feel, what you believe you know, what you don't know, you know, what you're worried about, what, you know, the more honest and sincere and you are, the more successful you become, because you connect to the people that really like what you're communicating.
Yeah.
And you find you build a great network that really kind of supports you. You find your tribe, your people, and that is a recipe in my experience for more success and for more happiness. So I wish everybody the very, very best in finding their own story. And I really hope that this is an area that we, you know, in PMX can kind of explore a bit more in the future. So thanks very much, everyone. Really, really have appreciated you being here.
We're here to help in anything.
Yes, please, guys, feel free also to approach me privately, or I don't know how you want, for more questions about it or deeper.
Yeah,
I'm very happy to share more information from my own personal experience.
Same here. I just say thanks for listening. I know I can do too much talking sometimes, but no, it's been a real pleasure actually working with everyone, with PMX and with Moody and Maram in particular. And please, again, feel free via PMX if there's anything anyone wants to know, any deeper information, because I could go on for weeks talking about storytelling and its psychology and its depth and its the folklore history. There's so much to it. It's really fascinating.
And actually, there's someone just asked about resources. If you saw in the chat, are there any resources that could help us
do this ourselves, to map our artists? Yes, lots.
Yeah.
We can manage it later to share it somehow, Sarah, through PMX or something.
Yeah. I've got there's several references at the back of my deck here, but I can suggest lots of things, whether that's for a commercial aspect or personal aspect. But there are lots and lots and lots of different books. I mean, what I've done is try to summarize a lot of the information and put it into a very simple format that people can follow and use. But I can certainly recommend.
Actually, so for who is looking for resources, just approach us personally, and make sure we'll pass it to you for now till we find the proper way to shape it, to frame it. I mean, publicly. Yeah. And hopefully the next PMX will have a full physical workshop about this.
Well, no, I mean, generally we run these things over a day. And that, you know, with brands, I've done it with individuals as well, but generally I take it over a day and we go through each section.
Wow,
what
amazing.
would be your inciting incident? Where do you want the story to start? And we discuss that. We look at different types of incident. The same with motive. What are the motives? And we discuss that for a long time. And I think that's where you need to sit down, and it's not a fast process. It's just a template you can put against it as you work through it. It takes a long time until you find something that sticks together, that I can certainly put you in the right direction to things.
Perfect.
Great.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you.
Okay, cool.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Sarah, Maram.
Sarah is trying to speak. Wait.
Yeah, no, I just wanted to say that, you know, the real beauty of PMX, as I said, I think at the beginning, is the network. You know, that all of us, those that manage, those that volunteer, those that have performed, you know, we're all sharing a desire to support each other and create a platform for Palestinian musicians and Palestinian music and a Palestinian music industry to thrive. So, you know, we all want to share. So please, nobody feel inhibited from getting in touch, you know, and asking your question, because if people can help each other in our network, they usually do. You know, we're all in this together. So on that note, thanks once again, and over and out.
Yeah. See you soon. Thank you. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, guys. Have a beautiful day.
Thanks, everyone.
Do we come out now?
Yeah.
So should we leave? Just leave, or?
Yeah. So.
What should I do?
Oh, Sarah,
I'll just end the meeting. Yeah.
Sarah, can you say only where the recording will be, because people were asking?
I don't know, I'm afraid.
Okay, we'll figure it out. I'll talk to you.
Perfect. I love this.
Bye.